So some of you who have been with me for a while, or those of you who've watched my entire archive, will remember some videos I did with a dude called Nick the Sagacious. I debated him on evolution and Christianity in general, and I thought it was a pretty good series. Well, he's back to contest some of what I said about Buddhism, so I'm going to address it. Let's get into it.
I just wanted to make a quick response video to my old friend Telltale Atheist who made a video on Buddhism. Please forgive me, my voice is a little raspy, a little cold going around.
I forgive you.
Yeah, so he made a video on Buddhism, and lately he's been doing a series on different cults, which I think is a fascinating subject. So much I didn't know that he's covered already. But it was interesting video he did on Buddhism, and I don't think he labeled it a cult, but...
No, I didn't label it a cult, but before we go any further, I do want to mention a couple of things. As you pointed out, I don't think it's a cult overall. I think it's pretty chill. That being said, there are Buddhist cults out there, and I didn't really say enough about them in my last video, so I'm gonna mention them now. Myanmar has been a hotbed for Buddhist violence recently. Apparently there's a militant organization in the area called the Democratic Karen Buddhist Army, or DKBA, led by a Buddhist monk. And this one has existed for a long time. Apparently, the guy who leads it now, named U Thuzana, has been leading it since 1992. The DKBA is an insurgent group of Buddhist soldiers. And it isn't just a tiny group of crazies. They're one of the biggest rebel groups in Myanmar. They had a ceasefire agreement with the Myanmar government if the government would help them financially and militarily. And the deal was the DKBA would help the government fight the KNU, which is the political arm of the Karen National Liberation Army. It's a big mess and people are dying every day. It's a lot like ISIS in some ways. So Buddhism isn't exempt from cult-like behavior. I wouldn't consider Western Buddhism a cult by any stretch, though I would consider the DKBA a cult. Cult-like behavior reveals itself without people even realizing it a lot of the time. Anyways, moving on to what Nick was saying.
There was one point in the end of the video where he said, so what good is Buddhism to me? What do I need this for? And I think that was where I wanted to step. He says, I don't need anything. I don't need a external source to be the arbiter of my morality or something like that, to give me guidance on this. So I can do it myself. Which is fine. I respect that. I got nothing against that. But I wanted to give you a perspective because you covered, so I'm going to be speaking directly to you, Tell. You covered it basically like, this is the religion of Buddhism and I don't need this, so let me go on and on about this religious aspect of it. But it's interesting because Buddhism is very old and it's also very splintered. There's very diverse groups of Buddhists out there, from the very, very religious to the point where they have like ceremonies and worship and all this other stuff. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there's these very, where you look at Buddhism not as a religion, but as a philosophy. And that's kind of where I come from.
That's fine with me. I can understand that a lot of people, especially in the West, want to attach themselves to the philosophical parts of it. I'm totally on board, but I actually got a lot of shit from a few friends, you included, for addressing Buddhism in the way I did on my channel. So I want to explain why I did it that way. Buddhism can be a philosophy, that's true, and that philosophy can serve some purpose, although I don't see a use for it in my own life. But outside of Western Buddhism, it's not just a philosophy, it's a way of life, as evidenced by the Myanmar militant armies. Sure, some Buddhists from other countries also treat it as a philosophy, but it's a very real religion to a vast number of people. So I wanted to address it on those terms, as a religion. Its origins, its myths, its founder, its holy texts. Another friend of mine said I was unfair to it by addressing it as a religion instead of a philosophy, but I don't think so. I think it's predominantly a religion to people throughout the world, which is the grounds on which I addressed it. As a philosophy, if we're setting aside all the mythology, I can get on board with a lot of it. Not all. But my problem with philosophies is the fact that when you start subscribing to specific philosophies, it can easily become dogma. Buddhism says not to hurt another living creature. Well, what if killing something meant indirectly saving somebody's life? Like, what if there was an animal whose blood had a valuable antigen in it, and if you killed a single living creature, the blood from it would save 2 million people. Which would win, the dogma or common sense? Why pit them against each other in the first place? I think we should live according to our own morals and not take on unnecessary philosophies that might or might not conflict with our own inherent morals somewhere down the line. That's not to say we can't take something of value from Buddhism, but we shouldn't subscribe to the philosophy as a whole without question.
My journey with Buddhism began with a book by Steve Hagen called Buddhism Plain and Simple. And it took a very secular view of Buddhism where it addressed it in the plainest of forms. And in the most simple way that I can say is just seeing the world as it is. And that's like about removing different, lenses that you view the world as. So I might view it as a Catholic, or I might view it as a Protestant or a Muslim or whatever. You have these different views, and trying to take those off and just see the world very plainly. And in that instance, that it is completely devoid of any religious aspects at all. There's no worship. There's no God. Nobody worships Buddha himself. There's none of that. It's just a philosophy of viewing the world. It's a realigning of perspective to make it more in line with reality. That is the most secular view of Buddhism that I've found. And then from there on, so I've held a lot of those beliefs while maintaining my Christianity and my Christian beliefs, and I've been very successful. It's been seamless. This is not interrupted at all. Any of the Christian beliefs, it's enhanced it, I would say.
That's fair, I'm on board, but you don't have to subscribe to this whole philosophy to remove the lenses through which you view the world. You can just remove the lenses. You can even use the techniques outlined in the book, but accepting everything else along with the good you see in it seems like dangerous territory to me.
But the Bodhisattva path is someone who follows the Bodhisattva path is postponing his entrance into nirvana so that he could remain here and help other people. I mean, it's pretty good, right? I mean, you look at when was it Peter who said to die is to profit, right? The Christians believe that this world is not our final place. This isn't our home. So, but while they're here, they're going to do good works. So they're going to go on missions like, the Mormons do, or they're going to go to Africa and build wells and stuff. They're going to alleviate the suffering of others. And that's for that reason they're going to remain here.
Oh man, I am so glad you didn't say, like Jehovah's Witnesses do. I'm sure you already know this after watching my videos, but for those who don't know, I want to point out one thing I don't like about Jehovah's Witnesses. They have tax-exempt status because they're a religious organization, and with that tax-exempt status comes the assumption that they're contributing something beneficial, right? Tax-exempt status is basically a government subsidy to organizations who are contributing something of value to the rest of society. The problem is the fact that Jehovah's Witnesses never, ever contribute anything of value to the rest of society. They go out of their way not to. When Hurricane Katrina hit Louisiana back in like 2006 or something, I was a Jehovah's Witness, and I remember a bunch of people from my congregation signing up to drive down there and help rebuild other Jehovah's Witnesses' homes. They went out of their way not to help anybody except fellow Jehovah's Witnesses. And as far as I can tell, that's actually the same with Mormons. When they go on missions, their goal is to convert people to Mormonism. It isn't to raise people out of poverty or to help build schools or any of that. It's to benefit themselves and nothing else. Now that doesn't apply to all religious organizations, of course. There are some out there who are earning their tax-exempt status. Can't exactly name any of them right now, but I'm sure they exist. Okay, back to what you were saying.
They're going to alleviate the suffering of others, and that's for that reason they're going to remain here. This is so in line with what the Bodhisattva path is, and so I started studying on this, and it is fascinating. And it's as a philosophy. Like, once again, it's not a religion; it's a philosophy. It's kind of like a path to follow to help kind of organize and direct your decisions. Now, I know you like to make these videos because you want to give people, first off, helping people get out of the cults and stuff, give them direction out of it. You want to help people, and I admire that. I think that's fantastic to help other people. Same thing with what I do in a lot of my stuff. So I think that can kind of speak to you when you say, well, why do I need this? Well, you don't necessarily need it, but it doesn't hurt. It gives you direction, just like studying the Stoics or any other philosophy. It gives you a way to organize your thoughts. It's something formal. You don't have to do it all yourself. You don't have to build from the ground up a whole sense of philosophy to follow. It does make your life easier when you have kind of a path, a written out path to follow, because when you have to make a decision, you just look at it through this heuristic that you've built. You know, is this helping others? Is this right speech?
I can get on board with that, but my main problem with following a philosophy which, at the very least, has religious roots, is the fact that instead of thinking for themselves, people are taking on this pre-built narrative, this pre-built idea of how they should live their lives. And being pre-built like that, naturally, they just go with it, even if one small aspect of what they're doing is legitimately harmful. They might not even realize that it's harmful. They just accept that that's the way it's done. I prefer to build my own philosophy off of the morals I know to be nothing short of unimpeachable. If I thought my philosophy and way of living was less than reputable, then I would change the ideal. I might not always live up to my own philosophy, but I strive for it, and nothing about it is pre-built or includes dogma of any kind. This is probably a poor example for you specifically, because I don't really know how you feel about the subject, but for the rest of the audience, what about abortion? Abortion is going to happen, whether we like it or not. Banning it leads to back alley situations with little or no sanitation, and there are some very horrific effects from it. How does Buddhism feel about that? Harm no living thing. It would be easy for somebody to justify banning that because of their feelings on Buddhism. Same with sex education. As a result of being against sexual misconduct, it's plausible to think that a Buddhist would be opposed to sex before marriage, which would put us right back in the boat we're in now with religious people trying to eliminate education on safe sex from schools, which is spiking unplanned pregnancy rates, which is spiking abortion rates. I make it a point in my life to accept as few pre-built philosophies as possible, because I never know when science might disagree with it. I never know when statistics might show that society benefits more when my philosophy isn't followed. Then which one wins the conflict? We should be building our philosophies around facts.
So that's why I think it's very useful to have a philosophy, or why Buddhism specifically is a good philosophy, because there are paths in it. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention the teacher of Pema Chodron, which is Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. I hope I said that right. Terrible. These names are rough.
Yes, they are. That's why I only pronounced each one once, and I got in the comments for mispronouncing them anyways, so we'll bear through it together.
But he is fascinating, his works. And Telly, you would probably be interested in one of them, is Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism. It's a book he wrote probably in the 80s or 70s or something. But interesting reading. It's all very good. But yeah, if Buddhism, not as a religion, but just as a philosophy, can be very helpful, can be very useful for a lot of people. And I believe it should be mentioned, because to leave the concept of Buddhism as a religion and not mention the non-spiritual side of it, the side where we just recognize shared humanity, where people don't do rituals or worship anything like that, where they're not in cults or anything, where they actually hold on to other religious identities while maintaining their Buddhist philosophy. I think that's useful. So I think that should be mentioned and added.
I can accept that the ideas it has can be beneficial. If it takes reading a book on Buddhism to learn how to look at things without a religious lens, or to decide that you should care for living things, then I'm all for it. But I refuse to accept a pre-built philosophy. I'm happy to pull the good parts from it and throw out the bad. Next time you give a Buddhist book a read, try this. See if you can pick out 3 bad ideas. Just give it a shot. Certainly out of the entire book, there must be 3 things that, when followed to their eventual end, could lead to something less than ideal for society. That being said, I have no real problem with Buddhism. I think it's a fine thing, until it isn't. So I'm cautious.
Yeah, cheers, man. Haven't chatted in a while. I hope all these things are well with you. Looks like your channel's doing great. Really proud of you. Cheers.
Thanks, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's been a good long time, but maybe we can get a short debate going again sometime. Anyways, that's all I've got for you. Follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. Thanks for watching.